Hey, what's up YouTube? Welcome to the We All Juggle Knives channel, and welcome to my review of this knife. This is the Elk Ridge Bushcraft knife. That's what they're calling it. The blade length is 5 1/4 inches by my measure. As you can see, it has a true full tang, but it is skeletonized, which I will show later in the video. The handle scales are nylon fiber. Now this is one of my budget-friendly series of knife reviews because this thing was less than $18. I got it on Amazon. Yeah, 17 and change. I will include a link. Please try to use those links. They do help support the channel, but there's 3 different models of this knife. Just the handle scales are different. They've got the green nylon, the black nylon, pack-a-wood, and I think they have tan, but I didn't see that one on Amazon. But I thought the green looked very foresty, very bushcrafty, so that's what I got. The steel on this, according to Amazon, the steel is 440A. Yes, and I have a lot of demo footage coming up in this video. It's going to be most of the video. It's just going to be doing stuff with it. All right, but I've beat this knife up quite a bit. It did survive. All right, making some notches with the Elk Ridge knife. Now, Elk Ridge is basically the outdoor brand that's owned by the same company that owns M-Tech. But I have found that the Elk Ridge branded knives are a bit better quality and a bit more practical than most of the M-Techs. Alright, so there you see I'm just removing the material between the 2 grooves to make the notch. But yeah, Elk Ridge, it's a good budget brand. I mean, you gotta pick and choose, obviously, but unlike the M-Techs, you know, M-Tech will sometimes have things like a knife that's shaped like a spider or scorpion or some weird thing, but you're not going to get any of that with the Elk Ridge brand. It's just their more practical line. Now this came well sharp enough to do this work with. You know, usually I just use instead of the crosswise batoning, I usually just use a small, like, Swiss Army knife saw. But we're reviewing this knife. So what is the use of notches? Well, you basically can fit them together to make all kinds of things, from shelters to traps to whatever you want. Alright, so there's my notch. It's a little sloppy, but, you know, that's the rush job. But even when you're talking about a budget knife, you want something that can withstand some abuse. Yeah, that was my segue to this segment, batoning. Now, remember what I've always said, batoning is good in a review because you want to know if the knife can take some hard hits. As far as being completely necessary for survival, I've never said it was. Occasionally we get baton haters here, yes, I know what you're thinking. Haters on the internet? No, I'm shocked. No, yeah, every once in a while you get people who are very hostile to batoning. I don't really understand that at all. I know Dave Canterbury has shown batoning in some of his videos, as has Nut and Fancy, as has Survival Lily, as has like 10 other channels, all bigger than my channel, so why would I refrain from doing something that the most successful channels do? I don't know. I think as long as you're not saying that it's the be-all and end-all, it's fine. I mean, I've batoned when I just had to make pieces thinner for some wood carving. It had nothing at all even to do with, quote, survival. So, you know, don't jump to conclusions. Don't make assumptions when you see it. Don't try to read too much into it. And speaking of carving, here's the Elk Ridge making. Well, I didn't feel like making one of my typical vampire steaks, as I call them, because those take a while, so I just got a really thin piece and we're carving. Well, it's going to be kind of like an arrowhead. And by the way, like, all that stuff, all that scene you see there, that's all covered with snow now. This footage was taken a few weeks ago, right? So we have very cold temperatures now, and also I tested out this this budget kukri on that same day. So you're going to see one more video where it looks like it's not winter yet, but trust me, we've got winter. As you see, there's the, it's kind of like an arrowhead shape, but without the, I didn't carve the shaft, obviously, but there it is, or you could think of it as a really thin nature shank. Let's call it a nature shank. But Yeah, this thing can carve, not as well as a dedicated carving knife, but you know, you're in the field. But you know, in the Philippines, they'll make arrowheads out of bamboo, and that'll punch through a sapling. There's a YouTube video of that. But anyway, here's making some shavings or curlicues or feather sticks. But as I've said before, if you want your feather sticks to look really pretty, you got to cherry pick the wood, not use just the scrap that I'm using. But as you watch that, let me just talk about bushcraft knives versus camp knives. As soon as you attach the term bushcraft to a blade, people have a lot of very stringent requirements for their bushcraft blades. So even though they named this the bushcraft knife, I think that's just because it's a popular trend. Don't take that literally. Think of this as more of just a camp knife or general outdoors knife, because it'll just make you feel better, okay? Because this does not meet the requirements of a lot of the gurus for bushcraft, and most of my subscribers, if they're bushcrafters, they already have several knives. They don't need another bushcraft knife. So think of this as more of like a camp knife. All right, so those are my shavings. But yeah, I mean, this is good for people just starting out. You know, it's under $20. Here is the sheath. It is nylon. It has 2 straps there with Velcro, and it has a belt loop and a tie down. All right, and then it has a retaining strap with a snap closure. There's the tie down. It's got a secondary pocket as well. The sheath does hold it in. You know, and it's got a buckle for that secondary pocket. You see the insert there as well. That's a smooth move. Yeah, you learned that in YouTube reviewer school. So what is in there? This is what's in there. You got a fire steel that I will test out later in the video. You got a striker, and you've got that stone for touching up the blade. All right, it's an alright sheath. I mean, especially for the price. All right, here is the tang. Also, it has a little compartment in the handle scales, and there's even more stuff inside the scales. All right, and you see the hardware there. So it is skeletonized. Is that a deal breaker? No, because it held up to a lot of abuse and batoning and stuff, so I'm not worried about the tang. Here is the stuff that came inside the little hidden compartment. You also see the hardware there. You can unscrew that with the striker that this comes with. All right, so in that you got 2 needles, some thread, and 3 really bad matches. One of them already fell apart from the vibration of use. But nobody's going to use those matches. Anyone who uses this is going to put their own stuff in there. Now, as for the skeletonized tang, do I think it's going to break because of that? No, not in this case. You know, there are pros and cons to it. Obviously, it would be stronger if it wasn't skeletonized so much, but it would also be a lot heavier, right? So it's like easier to carry, slightly less strong. Here I am testing out the striker and the little fire steel. Right, so I found that fire steel very difficult to get a good grip on just because it is small. I mean, I think it's meant as a backup. It's just a lot smaller than regular fire steels. As you can see, you know, it does make sparks, but I couldn't get the fire to start with this fire steel. And I think I tried for a good 20 minutes. Oh, it might have been 10 minutes, but it freaking seemed like forever. Yeah, so you get to watch my failure here. You know, I think someone with smaller hands might be able to use this little fire steel better than me. And I also have arthritis in my hand, by the way, so maybe I'm not the person to test out this little mini fire steel. But don't worry, I did start the fire eventually with something else, as you will see. Yeah, and because it's a shorter fire steel too, it's just, it's hard to get a long stroke, which is usually never a problem for me. Yes, that's innuendo. Alright, this is a different fire steel for comparison. I just wanted you to see the difference in the size and the amount of sparks that the larger fire steel makes. And with this fire steel, it took about 2 minutes. It was very windy. I had to rearrange my little shavings there a few times because the wind just went nuts. But it took about 2 minutes on this cold-ass day with that fire steel. Here's the money shot of any bushcraft video. And that firewood there, that's a wind shield. I'm not trying to start those on fire or just have a big fire. Oh, by the way, please practice fire safety. I've already mentioned that in numerous videos, so I'll just say don't go like younger people out there, don't play around with it like it's a game. Like, seek the guidance of trusted adults and so forth. All right, final thoughts on this knife. I think it's pretty good for the price. I mean, it's hard to argue with the price because it's like, it was 17 and change. I mean, under 20. Yeah, it's definitely good for that price. People will compare it to some models of Mora knives because those are usually inexpensive too, but it's really a pointless comparison because the designs are so different. If you're going to compare this to something, compare it to like a K-Bar BK2, because as far as just the shape and the length, it looks a lot more like a K-Bar BK2, right? Which is obviously a better knife, but also has a much higher price tag. But it's a more apt comparison than to the Mora. So is this a good, like, bargain budget bin version of that type of design? Yes, it is. And as for that fire steel, you know, it's small because they had to make it fit in that pocket. So just think of it as a backup and not a primary, and you'll be good. As for bushcraft, most bushcrafters I know use a blade that is more narrow and a bit shorter than this, so I'm not sure about using it for bushcraft, but you could. But I do recommend it as a budget option for general outdoors knife and or camp knife. It's a good value in those categories. So check out the links in the text box. They do support the channel and they really help. This has been We All Juggle Knives. I'm out.